Hi, everyone. My prediction for 2023 is that data observability is going to be a must-have for every single organization. My name is Barr Moses. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo helps organizations accelerate the adoption of reliable data. We actually created the data observability category and are very fortunate to work with amazing folks, including the data teams at GitLab, PagerDuty, JetBlue, and New York Times. We also wrote the industry's first book on the topic, along with O'Reilly, and we've raised over $200 million from the same folks who invested in Snowflake, Looker, and many others. So back to my prediction. I think data observability is going to be a must-have fit for any organization, and here's why. So setting the scene for a second, if you're on this sort of conference, you know that data is bigger than ever. We have BigQuery posting $1.5 billion of ARR, Snowflake with $1.2 billion ARR, Databricks crossing the $1 billion ARR, and many others. The reality is that data has become mission critical to companies everywhere. Data products are exploding, and the rise of new jobs and titles like data product managers is everywhere. But here's the problem, here's the catch. While data is more important than ever, it's still highly unreliable, and data is wrong all the time. And particularly in this market, that's just unacceptable. Here are just a couple examples that we've seen in the last couple of months where bad data impacted the bottom line and company revenue. So for example, Unity, which is a gaming company, actually lost $100 million because of one bad data mistake. You heard that right, $100 million because of one bad data issue that was related to their ad data. Another example, Equifax actually assigned inaccurate credit scores to millions of users because of bad data. Think about the impact of that. Folks getting loans or mortgages and are unable to do that because of bad credit scores. The list of examples goes on and on. Many folks, executives and stakeholders who are actually using data to make decisions in their day-to-day actually can't trust the data. And that is something that we think should be part of the past. So here's the solution. And here's what I think folks are going to adopt in 2023. Data teams across the world should actually take a page from software development book. And that's where data observability comes in. Data observability actually draws on the concept of software observability. So for anyone who's familiar with engineering teams and building engineering best practices, knows that engineering teams have some way to manage the reliability of their application and infrastructure. So think about AppDynamics, Datadog, New Relic, and many other solutions that help engineers make sure that their infrastructure and their applications are reliable. However, for us data teams, we're just flying blind. We have nothing to manage the reliability of our products, and that's crazy. I think data needs to be treated with the exact same diligence that we're treating engineering products. I actually experienced this firsthand in Gainsight, a company that I worked at prior to Monte Carlo. I woke up every Monday morning to a barrage of emails asking why is the data wrong, and started going on this hunt to figure out what went wrong and why. And then I spoke with hundreds of data leaders across the industry and realized that this is a shared problem. Time and again, data downtime, which is basically periods of time when data is missing, erroneous, or otherwise inaccurate, came up as a problem that was top of mind for folks. Folks felt like the problem of data downtime didn't only exist today, but is actually going to become worse over time. You know, data teams invest in the best infrastructure, the best modern data stack. We have the best ways to, or sort of world-class ways to aggregate, transform, process, and analyze data. But at the end of the day, that data is inaccurate or that data is wrong. How crazy is that? And so here's what I'd like to propose in terms of kind of practical solutions for data observability and what I think data teams are going to double down on. The first is what we call the 5 pillars of data observability. And I'll briefly explain what these are. These we've put together sort of as a result of kind of a combination of speaking with hundreds of folks across the industry who share the same problems. And we actually consolidated all of the insights into one framework that really helps data teams put these best practices in place. And so the first pillar in the 5 data observability pillar is freshness. So freshness actually allows data teams to understand whether and how their data is up to date. The most common use case here is for folks who actually rely on third-party data to arrive on time. And so being able to learn the cadence in which your particular table or data asset is being updated That might be once a day, once a week, or 3 times an hour. And being able to automatically understand when that is violated and letting the data team know about that. Think about what are some of the ways to do that at scale, not just for hundreds, but hundreds and thousands of tables. Second is volume. So volume refers to the completeness of data tables and actually offers insight into the health of your data sources. So think about this. If you're expecting 200 million rows to arrive on time, and then suddenly that turns into 5 million rows today, you know you're probably facing some sort of issue with your data, or at least you want to know about it. The third pillar is quality. And so data quality metrics are important to give us insights. And some of these sort of metrics, there's a variety of ways to look at this, but some of these can give you insight into things like nulls, duplicate values, and other issues that actually indicate that you might have a problem with the logic. Another example is actually the values. So if, for example, you're expecting a particular field to have numbers and suddenly you get letters, or if you have cents instead of dollars, or if you're looking for a range between 5 and 20 and suddenly it's 100, right? You probably want to know about that issue. The fourth pillar is schema. So schema really refers to changes in the organization of the data. It's not uncommon for someone to make a change, to completely drop a table or change a type of field, or delete a field or change a field. And in those instances, folks who are downstream are often on the receiving end of those changes, are unaware of those, and often face data breaking as a result. And so actually understanding, who's making the changes and why is really foundational to understanding the health of your data and allowing the open communication around those, let alone preventing these issues from happening. How do we make schema changes in a way that keeps everyone around us informed, lets us move fast, but also not break all the data that depends on that schema change? And then finally, the last pillar is lineage, which is my favorite pillar. When we speak about lineage, actually, talking about both table and field level lineage. And, the cool thing about lineage that it actually allows us to answer some really fundamental questions about data breaking. So when data breaks, the very first question you have is where and who cares about it, right? And so data lineage allows us to do two things. First of all, it allows us to say, hey, something here broke. Who's everyone downstream that's actually impacted by this? Who needs to know about this? And what's the impact of those folks, right? Are there reports that rely on that data breaking that are actually being used by our customer day to day? Is the marketing team using that for an important campaign? Is our financial team using that data to report to the street? There are many use cases for understanding the downstream consumers. And then similarly, the second thing that lineage can help us with is understanding what are the upstream sources that may be contributing to the root cause. So we can basically develop a stronger understanding of where data is breaking, why, help us triage those issues faster. And then the second sort of framework, those were the 5 pillars of data observability. And then the second framework that I really encourage folks to sort of think through, and seeing more and more data teams drive momentum on, is actually thinking about data reliability lifecycle as an iterative and repeatable process. So again, looking at software development as somewhere that we can draw inspiration and really build on. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can sort of take concepts that work for DevOps. In software development, we basically have the DevOps life cycle, where you're really moving from a very reactive way of building products to a more proactive and scalable way. And while many of our data technologies and frameworks that are really popular today have actually adapted, I would say that the way in which we've handled data quality to date hasn't been sufficient. So some of the things that folks do today, whether it's data testing, or data SLAs, or data contracts, which are very hot these days, or even some sort of distributed architectures, which have been sort of taking shape more recently. All of those are things sort of folks are doing, but I would say that none of that is really going to be successful if we don't think about our culture and our process. And so I think data teams are really sort of have OKRs or put data observability at the front of their strategy, are those that we're seeing make the most progress in terms of being able to deliver reliable data products to their consumers and actually making an impact on their businesses. And so taking a big step back, I think the goal of all of this is to really enable data teams wherever they are, to be able to answer a couple of fundamental questions. The first is data teams should always be the first to know about data breaking. It's long gone are the days that we hear about this from someone else, or that we hear about it this months or years later, right? Data teams should know in the moment, near real time, whenever data breaks, whenever there are any data quality issues for data products. The second is data teams should be able to understand the impact of the issue and understand where data broke and able to take action to fix the issue. Most data teams, or many data teams that are in a reactive mode, can take actually like months to uncover and then additional time to actually figure out what went wrong and why. I think that needs to change. And then the final thing, I think that if we develop smarter processes around this, we can actually collect those learnings so we can prevent the issues from begin with. Teams that put data observability at the forefront often report actually north of 70 to 80% reduction in data downtime incidents happening to begin with, which is quite remarkable. That being said, I'm curious to hear your observations. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know your thoughts on this. Always curious. It's, the topic that I'm very passionate about. Would love to hear folks' reactions. So as we wrap up an eventful 2022 and enter the new year, I wish everyone an amazing new year, amazing holiday time, and most importantly, I wish you no data downtime.